Welcome. I'm so glad to be back with you. Every story you're about to hear is real, terrifying, and sent in by listeners just like you. So, turn off the lights, wrap yourself in a blanket, grab some snacks. You're in for a night of true horror. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It truly helps and inspires us to bring you even more chilling tales. Are you ready? Then settle in, because it's time for the long-awaited scary stories for a rainy evening. The storm outside battered the windows of Dr. Eleanor Hart's study with relentless fury, but it was nothing compared to the tempest raging within her mind. Sitting at her desk, she stared blankly at the ancient journal sprawled open before her, its yellowed pages filled with cramped handwriting that seemed to writhe under the flickering lamplight. She had spent decades as an archaeologist, uncovering secrets buried beneath layers of time, yet nothing could have prepared her for what lay hidden in the sands of Egypt's forgotten tombs. It began innocently enough, a simple excavation near Luxor commissioned by a private collector who wished to remain anonymous. The site promised little more than fragments of pottery and crumbling statues, relics of no great significance. But deep beneath the earth, they found it. A relic unlike anything documented in any historical archive or mythological text. It was a small obsidian figurine, no taller than the span of her hand, carved into the likeness of a faceless deity with elongated limbs and jagged edges meant to mimic feathers, or perhaps claws. What struck Eleanor most, however, wasn't its unsettling design, but the way it seemed to hum faintly when touched, vibrating with an energy that defied explanation. Now, months later, she sat alone in her dimly lit study, clutching the journal tightly as if afraid it might slip away. Her colleagues had long since abandoned the project, citing unforeseen circumstances or personal reasons. Some had left abruptly, others vanished altogether. Only Eleanor remained, driven by a mixture of curiosity and dread. She knew now that the relic was far older than humanity itself, a remnant of an age predating recorded history. And though she couldn't prove it, she suspected it held answers to questions mankind wasn't meant to ask. But tonight, as lightning illuminated the room in brief bursts of brilliance, Eleanor felt something new, a presence. It was subtle at first, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing down the empty hallway outside her door. No one else was home. Slowly, she rose from her chair, heart pounding in her chest, and crept toward the doorway. The whispers returned, louder this time, coalescing into words she could almost understand. And then, as suddenly as it began, the noise ceased. Silence enveloped the house, heavy and suffocating. Eleanor hesitated, torn between fear and resolve. Whatever force had been awakened, whatever entity lurked beyond the veil of reality, it wanted something from her, and she feared she already knew what it was. Dr. Eleanor Hart adjusted the brim of her wide-brimmed hat as she surveyed the excavation site, her sharp blue eyes scanning the barren expanse of sand stretching endlessly before her. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dunes and bathing the landscape in a golden hue that belied its harshness. Behind her, a team of archaeologists and laborers worked diligently, brushing away centuries of dust from the remains of what appeared to be an ancient temple complex. Eleanor had always been drawn to history's forgotten corners, places where civilizations once thrived, but were now reduced to whispers on the wind. Her fascination with Egypt began during her university years when she stumbled upon a lecture about Akhenaten's reign, a pharaoh whose radical religious reforms left him ostracized by his own people. Over time, her interest evolved into a career spanning 2 decades, taking her to remote sites across Europe, Asia, and Africa. But this expedition felt different. For one, it was funded not by a university or museum, but by an enigmatic benefactor known only as Mr. Blackwell. And secondly, there was no record, archaeological or otherwise, of any significant structures existing at this particular location. The site itself seemed ordinary enough. Crumbling walls, faded hieroglyphs, and fragments of pottery scattered like discarded memories. Yet something about it unsettled Eleanor. Perhaps it was the oppressive heat which clung to her skin despite the early morning hour. Or perhaps it was the way the workers avoided meeting her gaze, their expressions wary, almost fearful. Whatever it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were disturbing something best left undisturbed. "Thou at the heart!" called out a voice, snapping her out of her reverie. Turning, she saw Dr. Lucas Becker approaching, his lanky frame silhouetted against the rising sun. A German archaeologist with a penchant for sarcasm and an uncanny ability to decipher even the most cryptic inscriptions, Lucas had become both a trusted colleague and occasional thorn in Eleanor's side over the years. Today, however, his usual smirk was absent, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "We found something," he said, gesturing toward a narrow trench dug into the earth nearby. "You'll want to see this." Curiosity piqued, Eleanor followed him, weaving through piles of debris until they reached the edge of the trench. Peering down, she saw what appeared to be a stone slab embedded in the ground, its surface etched with intricate carvings, unlike anything she'd encountered before. Unlike traditional Egyptian motifs depicting buzz, animals, or daily life, these images were abstract, angular shapes arranged in patterns that seemed deliberately chaotic, as if designed to confuse rather than enlighten. "What do you make of it?" Lucas asked, crouching beside her. Eleanor hesitated, running her fingers lightly over the carvings. They felt rough beneath her touch, yet strangely warm, as though retaining some residual energy from the desert sun. "It's unusual," she admitted finally. "Not typical of any known period or style. Could be pre-dynastic, but..." She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the unease growing in her chest. "But," Lucas prompted, raising an eyebrow. "But I don't think it's Egyptian," she finished softly. "At least, not entirely." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Before either of them could respond, a shout echoed from farther down the trench. Both turned simultaneously to see one of the laborers waving frantically, his face pale beneath the grime coating his skin. Without exchanging another word, they hurried toward him, hearts pounding with equal parts excitement and dread. When they arrived, the man pointed wordlessly to a rectangular opening in the ground, partially obscured by loose sand. It was small, just large enough for a person to crawl through, but unmistakably artificial. As Eleanor knelt to examine it more closely, she noticed faint markings carved along the edges, similar to those on the stone slab above. Something about them made her stomach twist uncomfortably. "This wasn't here yesterday," Lucas muttered, glancing around as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the shadows. Eleanor nodded absently, her mind racing. Whoever or whatever had created this entrance clearly didn't intend for it to be found easily, which begged the question, why had it been hidden in the first place? "We need to go inside," she said firmly, ignoring the skeptical look Lucas shot her. "Whatever's down there might hold the key to understanding this place." "And if it doesn't?" he countered, crossing his arms. "What if it holds something else entirely? Something dangerous?" For a moment, Eleanor considered his words. She had spent years cultivating a reputation as a meticulous, level-headed archaeologist, one who prioritized caution over recklessness. But deep down, she knew this discovery was too important to ignore. If there was even a chance it could shed light on humanity's distant past, she owed it to herself and to history to investigate further. "Then we proceed carefully," she replied, grabbing a flashlight from her satchel. "But we go." Lucas sighed but didn't argue further. Instead, he retrieved a lantern from a nearby supply crate and lit it, casting flickering orange light across the group gathering around the entrance. Among them was Sofia Alvarez, a young Spanish linguist whose expertise in ancient languages had proven invaluable on previous expeditions. Victor Novak, a burly Czech engineer tasked with ensuring a structural stability. and Amar Nasser, an Egyptian historian whose knowledge of local folklore often provided context where academic records fell short. Together, the five of them formed a tight-knit team, each member bringing unique skills to the table. Yet as they prepared to descend into the unknown, Eleanor couldn't help but notice the tension radiating from her companions. Even Sophia, usually cheerful and eager, seemed unusually subdued, her dark eyes darting nervously between the opening and the surrounding desert. "All right," Eleanor announced, breaking the silence. "Let's move forward step by step. Stay close, keep your light steady, and report anything unusual immediately. Understood?" A chorus of murmured affirmations followed, though none sounded particularly confident. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor lowered herself into the opening, her boots scraping against the rough stone walls as she descended into the darkness below. The passage sloped downward at a steep angle, forcing the group to navigate carefully to avoid slipping. The air grew cooler and damper the deeper they went, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that made Eleanor wrinkle her nose. Shadows danced eerily in the beam of her flashlight, distorting the already alien carvings lining the walls. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of countless centuries pressed down upon them. After several minutes of cautious descent, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, illuminated faintly by shafts of sunlight filtering through cracks overhead. The space was dominated by a towering statue carved from black basalt, its features worn smooth by time. Unlike the stylized depictions of gods common in Egyptian art, this figure was grotesque, its elongated limbs twisted unnaturally, its head devoid of any recognizable facial features, save for a gaping maw filled with jagged teeth. Eleanor froze, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Around her, the others reacted similarly, their faces pale and slack-jawed with shock. Even Lucas, normally quick with a quip, remained silent, his lantern casting ghostly highlights across the monstrous effigy. "What is that?" Sophia whispered, voicing the question none dared ask aloud. Before anyone could answer, a low rumble reverberated through the chamber, sending fine particles of dust cascading from the ceiling. Instinctively, Eleanor raised her arm to shield her face, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. When the shaking subsided, she lowered her arm cautiously, only to find the statue's empty eye sockets staring directly at her. Or so it seemed. And then, barely audible above the collective gasps of her team, came the whisper. It started as a soft murmur, indistinct and fleeting, like wind rustling through dry leaves. But as it grew louder, individual syllables began to take shape, forming words that slithered into her mind with sinister clarity. "Waken." Eleanor staggered backward, nearly dropping her flashlight. Beside her, Lucas grabbed her arm, steadying her as he scanned the room frantically. "Did you hear that?" she demanded, her voice barely above a croak. He nodded grimly, glancing nervously around the chamber. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before they could retreat, the ground beneath their feet shuddered violently, throwing them off balance. From somewhere deep within the chamber came a sound like grinding stone, followed by an unearthly wail that sent chills racing down Eleanor's spine. In the chaos, she caught sight of the statue's mouth moving, its jagged teeth gnashing together as though chewing on invisible prey. "Run!" Victor bellowed, seizing Sophia's hand and dragging her toward the tunnel. Amara followed close behind, her lantern swinging wildly in her grip. Only Eleanor and Lucas remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise ceased. The chamber fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the two archaeologists still standing. Slowly, Eleanor turned to Lucas, her expression mirroring the terror coursing through her veins. "What have we done?" she whispered. Lucas shook his head, his face ashen. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." The journey back through the tunnel felt interminable, every step fraught with tension as the group scrambled upward toward the surface. The walls seemed to close in around them, the carvings glowing faintly in the dim light of their flashlights, as if mocking their retreat. Every sound, the scrape of boots against stone, the labored breathing of her companions, felt amplified, heightening the sense of impending doom. When they finally burst into the open air, blinking against the harsh sunlight, Eleanor collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Around her, the others did the same, their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. For several minutes, no one spoke, the weight of what they had witnessed settling over them like a suffocating blanket. "What was that thing?" Sophia finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor shook her head, unable to articulate the words swirling chaotically in her mind. Whatever it wasn't of this world, at least not anymore. And it had known about the statue, known and feared it. "We need to seal that entrance," Victor declared abruptly, rising to his feet. "Whatever's down there, it doesn't belong up here." "No," Eleanor countered sharply, surprising even herself with her vehemence. "We can't just walk away. Not now. That statue, it's important. Too important to ignore." "You're insane," Lucas snapped, rounding on her. "Didn't you hear what that thing said? It's dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with. And that's exactly why we need to understand it." Eleanor shot back, her tone unwavering. "If we leave now, we'll never know what we've uncovered. Worse, someone else might find it, and they won't hesitate to exploit it." The argument hung in the air, unresolved as the others exchanged uneasy glances. Amara was the first to break the silence. "She's right," she said quietly. "This isn't just about us. If there's even a chance this relic holds power or poses a threat, we owe it to the world to investigate further." Lucas sighed heavily, running a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. "Fine, but we do this carefully. No more reckless descents. We document everything, analyze every detail, and prepare for the worst." Eleanor nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you," she said softly. "All of you." But even as they began devising a plan to return to the chamber, Eleanor couldn't shake the image of the creature's hollow gaze, or the chilling certainty that whatever they had awakened, it wasn't finished with them yet. The decision to return to the chamber was made reluctantly, born out of a mix of duty and morbid curiosity. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to prepare for their second descent, fortifying themselves with equipment, knowledge, and, though none would admit it, desperation. Eleanor took charge, her usual meticulousness giving way to an almost obsessive focus on documenting every detail. She pored over ancient texts, cross-referencing obscure legends that might shed light on the artifact and its origins. Meanwhile, Sophia scoured linguistic databases, searching for patterns in the cryptic carvings adorning the walls of the tunnel. Despite their efforts, unease lingered like a shadow over the camp. The workers whispered among themselves in hushed tones, many refusing to even glance toward the excavation site. One night, as Eleanor sat alone under the stars reviewing notes by lantern light, she noticed Amara standing nearby, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Dr. Hart," Amara began hesitantly, "may I speak frankly?" Eleanor looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her colleague's voice. "Of course." Amara hesitated before speaking again, her dark eyes flickering nervously. "What we saw down there, it reminded me of something from my grandmother's stories. Tales passed down through generations about beings older than the monks. Entities that once ruled this land before humanity arose. They were called Al-Nathir, the Forgotten Ones." Eleanor leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." "They say these beings were cast out, or perhaps imprisoned, by forces beyond comprehension. But they left behind fragments of themselves, relics imbued with their essence, capable of bending reality to their will. My grandmother warned never to disturb such artifacts, for doing so risks awakening what lies dormant." A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. You think the statue is one of these relics? Amara nodded grimly. It fits the descriptions. And if that creature was telling the truth, if it truly serves the relic, then we may have unleashed something far worse than we realize. For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing, her mind racing. Could it be true? Was the statue not merely an object of worship or art, but a vessel containing the remnants of an ancient, malevolent force? If so, why had no records survived detailing its existence? Or had they been deliberately erased? We'll proceed carefully, Eleanor added, her tone firm despite the doubt gnawing at her resolve. But we can't turn back now, not when answers are within reach. Amara sighed but didn't argue further. Instead, she offered a small, resigned smile. Just promise me you won't let your curiosity blind you to the danger. I promise, Eleanor replied, though deep down, she wasn't sure she believed her own words. The following morning, the team gathered at the entrance to the tunnel, their expressions grim but determined. Armed with reinforced gear, recording devices, and a portable generator to ensure reliable lighting, they descended once more into the depths below. This time, however, the atmosphere felt different, heavier, as though the very air resisted their presence. Every step echoed unnaturally loud, and the faint metallic tang grew stronger, clinging to their skin like an invisible film. As they reached the chamber housing the statue, Eleanor froze, her flashlight beam catching sight of something new. What shone across the floor were symbols etched into the stone, fresh markings that hadn't been there during their previous visit. They pulsed faintly with an otherworldly glow, shifting colors between shades of crimson and obsidian. What the hell, Lucas muttered, crouching beside one of the symbols. These weren't here before. Sophia knelt beside him, her brow furrowed in concentration. They're similar to the carvings outside, but more complex, almost like instructions. Instructions for what? Victor asked, his voice tight with suspicion. Before anyone could answer, a low guttural growl echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the stone walls. It wasn't animalistic, nor entirely human. It sounded like the grinding of gears mixed with the rasp of sandpaper. The sound sent a primal shiver coursing through Eleanor's body, rooting her feet to the spot despite every instinct screaming at her to run. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow detached itself from the darkness near the statue, elongated and impossibly thin, its edges shifting and writhing like smoke caught in a breeze. It slithered along the floor, moving faster than any living creature should, until it coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape directly in front of them. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side, studying them with an intelligence that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "What the hell is that?" Lucas hissed, raising his lantern higher. The flame flickered wildly, casting distorted shadows that danced across the walls. No one answered. They were too transfixed by the apparition, which now stood motionless, its form solidifying into something halfway between man and monster. Its skin, if it could be called that, was a patchwork of jagged obsidian plates, each shard glinting wickedly in the dim light. Its face remained featureless, except for a single vertical slit where its mouth should have been, pulsating faintly as though drawing breath. Then it spoke. "You have awakened me," it rasped, its voice layered with countless others, overlapping and discordant. "Why do you disturb my rest?" Eleanor swallowed hard, forcing herself to take a step forward, despite the terror clawing at her insides. "We didn't mean to intrude," she said, her voice steady despite the quaver threatening to break it. "We're archaeologists. We came here seeking knowledge, nothing more." The creature tilted its head again, considering her words. For a moment, Eleanor thought she saw amusement, or perhaps mockery in its posture. Then it raised one skeletal hand, pointing toward the statue behind them. "That thing," it said, gesturing languidly. "It calls to you. calls to all who dare approach. You cannot unsee what has been revealed. What does it want? Sophia blurted out, clutching her satchel to her chest. What does it mean? The creature turned its gaze on her, and for a fleeting second, Eleanor thought she saw something akin to pity in its empty expression. It wants only what it has always wanted, it replied cryptically, to be whole again. Before anyone could press further, the ground beneath their feet shuddered violently, nearly knocking them off balance. The statue groaned audibly, its surface cracking as though under immense strain. Tiny fragments of basalt rained down around them, and the air grew thick with dust. Enough talking, Victor barked, grabbing Sophia's wrist and dragging her toward the tunnel. Amara followed close behind, her lantern swinging wildly in her grip. Only Eleanor and Lucas remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise ceased. The chamber fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the two archaeologists still standing. Slowly, Eleanor turned to Lucas, her expression mirroring the terror coursing through her veins. "What have we done?" she whispered. Lucas shook his head, his face ashen. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and mounting paranoia. Eleanor tried to maintain an outward appearance of composure, but the weight of what had transpired in the chamber gnawed at her relentlessly. Sleep eluded her, replaced by restless nights filled with fragmented dreams of endless deserts, looming monoliths, and the ever-present whispering voice. By day, she threw herself into analyzing their findings, poring over photographs, recordings, and notes in search of answers. Yet no matter how many hours she spent dissecting the data, the pieces refused to fit together. It was as though the relic, in whatever force it represented, was deliberately obscuring its true nature. Her colleagues weren't faring much better. Lucas had grown increasingly irritable, snapping at even minor inconveniences, while Sophia seemed perpetually on edge, jumping at every unexpected sound. Victor busied himself reinforcing the camp's defenses, though his usual pragmatism now bordered on obsession. Only Amara appeared relatively unaffected, though Eleanor noticed the historian retreating more frequently into quiet contemplation, often disappearing for hours at a time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Eleanor found herself sitting alone outside her tent, staring blankly at the excavation site. The entrance to the tunnel yawned open like a wound, its dark maw seeming to pulse faintly in the fading light. She shivered despite the warmth lingering in the air, clutching a cup of tea she hadn't touched. "Dr. Hart," Amar's voice broke the silence, pulling Eleanor from her thoughts. She turned to see the historian approaching, carrying a small leather-bound book. "May I join you?" Eleanor nodded, gesturing toward the space beside her. "Of course." Amara settled down, opening the book carefully. Its pages were yellowed with age, covered in delicate handwriting interspersed with intricate illustrations. "This belonged to my grandmother," she explained, running her fingers lightly over the text. "It contains some of the stories she told me about the Al-Nathir. I thought it might help." Eleanor leaned closer, intrigued. "What does it say?" Amara hesitated, flipping through the pages until she found the section she sought. "Here," she said, pointing to a passage accompanied by a crude drawing of a faceless figure surrounded by swirling symbols. Describes how the Forgotten Ones communicated with those who worshipped them or feared them. They didn't use words exactly. Instead, they implanted images and sensations directly into the minds of their chosen vessels. "That matches what we experience," Eleanor murmured, recalling the vivid hallucinations induced by the whispers. "But why us? Why now?" Amara sighed, closing the book gently. "According to these writings, the Al-Nathir are bound by ancient pacts forged long before humanity existed. These pacts keep them imprisoned, but they can be broken if certain conditions are met. One of those conditions involves the relics, the fragments of their essence. If someone were to reunite the relics, they'd restore the Forgotten One's power, Eleanor finished, her stomach churning at the implications. And the statue, it must have been one of those fragments. Amara nodded grimly. Which means whoever or whatever is guiding us may intend to complete the ritual. Eleanor straightened, her heart pounding wildly. Then we're not just dealing with a supernatural artifact. We're pawns in something far larger. The revelation sent shockwaves through the team, fracturing whatever fragile sense of closure they had clung to. It wasn't just the ominous implications that unsettled them. It was the realization that their victory had been incomplete, a mere prelude to something far darker. Each member reacted differently, their paths diverging as they grappled with the weight of what lay ahead. Sophia's descent. Sophia Alvarez became obsessed with deciphering the prophecy, retreating into her work with an intensity bordering on mania. Her small apartment in Madrid transformed into a chaotic labyrinth of notes, maps, and ancient texts, their pages marked with frantic scribbles and underlined passages. She barely slept, subsisting on coffee and sheer determination, driven by the belief that understanding the prophecy could prevent another catastrophe. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly while studying a fragment of Sumerian scripture recovered from a private collector's archive. The text spoke of a marked one, chosen by the El Nathir not through ritual or artifact, but by proximity during a moment of convergence. The description matched Eleanor's final act, the ritual she performed to sever the relic's connection, but it hinted at unintended consequences. Eleanor didn't destroy the link, Sophia whispered aloud, her voice trembling as she pieced together the implications. She absorbed it. If true, this meant Eleanor hadn't sacrificed herself solely to banish the Forgotten Ones. She had become a vessel for their essence, a living relic bound to their power. And if fragments of the Al-Nathir still existed elsewhere, then Eleanor, or whoever bore her legacy, could be key to either finishing the job or completing the resurrection. But finding her was no simple task. Days turned into weeks as Sophia scoured satellite images, geological surveys, and eyewitness accounts for signs of unusual activity near Antarctica. Finally, she stumbled upon a lead, reports of strange lights emanating from a remote research station deep within the frozen continent. Packing hastily, she booked passage aboard a supply ship headed south, leaving behind only a cryptic voicemail for Amara. I think I know where she is. If I don't come back, tell the others I tried. Amara's burden. Amara Nasser, meanwhile, returned to Cairo, seeking solace in the stories passed down by her grandmother. Yet even as she immersed herself in folklore and oral histories, she couldn't escape the gnawing suspicion that Gustav Reinhardt was involved in something far larger than his eccentric collection of cursed artifacts. His sudden reappearance in Siberia and the seismic anomalies reported nearby raised red flags she couldn't ignore. Determined to uncover the truth, Amara reached out to old contacts within Egypt's archaeological community, piecing together whispers of similar disturbances across the globe. In each case, the pattern was the same: symbols appearing overnight, followed by tremors and disappearances. Someone, or something, was deliberately awakening dormant fragments of the Al-Nathir, using them to rebuild the connection Eleanor had severed. Her investigation led her to a secretive organization known only as the Veil, rumored to specialize in containing supernatural threats. Though wary of their motives, Amara agreed to meet with one of their operatives, a stoic woman named Nadia, who claimed to have information about Reinhardt's activities. He's searching for the Nexus, Nadia explained over encrypted communications, a place where all fragments converge, a gateway to the Al-Nathir's realm. And you think he'll succeed? Amara asked, her stomach churning at the thought. Nadia hesitated before replying. Not alone, but if he finds allies among those who worship the Forgotten Ones. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Amara understood the stakes perfectly. With renewed urgency, she prepared to infiltrate Reinhardt's operation, knowing full well it might cost her life. Before leaving, she recorded a message for Victor and Lucas, detailing everything she'd uncovered. Whatever happens next, trust no one, not even yourselves. The enemy isn't just outside anymore, it's inside us too. Victor's preparation. Victor Novak channeled his grief into action, transforming his workshop into a fortress stocked with tools designed for survival in hostile environments. He crafted weapons capable of disrupting energy fields, reinforced suits lined with materials resistant to extreme temperatures, and portable containment units for neutralizing supernatural entities. Every item served a dual purpose: practical utility and desperate hope. Yet despite his outward focus on preparation, Victor couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. By salvaging fragments of the relics, he had acted out of fear rather than reason, clinging to the belief that knowledge equaled control. Now, staring at the locked chest containing those shards, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. His doubts crystallized when Lucas arrived unannounced, his face gaunt and haunted. Without preamble, Lucas handed him a photograph taken near the Scottish fissure. In it, a shadowy figure stood amidst the ruins, its form indistinct yet unmistakably humanoid. "This appeared after I left," Lucas said grimly. "I think it's following me." Victor examined the image closely, his pulse quickening. "That's not just any shadow, that's a fragment, an echo of the Al-Nathir." Lucas nodded, his expression grim. "And it's getting stronger. Yesterday I heard whispers again, clearer this time. They're calling my name." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. If the fragments were reactivating, targeting individuals connected to the original ritual, then none of them were safe. Together they devised a plan. Use the remaining relics to lure the entity into a trap, hoping to contain it long enough to analyze its weaknesses. As they worked, Victor couldn't help but notice how often Lucas glanced over his shoulder, as though expecting the shadow to materialize at any moment. Neither voiced their fears aloud, but both knew the truth. Their time was running out. Lucas's ordeal. For Lucas Becker, paranoia became a constant companion. The whispers grew louder with each passing day, intruding on his thoughts until they felt like physical presences pressing against his skull. At night, he dreamed of endless deserts bathed in crimson light, towering monoliths carved with grotesque figures, and skies filled with writhing shapes that defied description. Always at the center of these visions stood the shadow, watching, waiting. Desperate for answers, Lucas traveled to the Carpathian monastery, hoping to find clues hidden within its crumbling walls. What he discovered instead was a warning etched into the stone floor of the library: "Beware the marked one, for they carry the seed of destruction and salvation." The words chilled him to the bone, their meaning clear yet maddeningly vague. Was he the marked one, or was it someone else entirely? And if so, how could they stop whatever fate awaited them? Before leaving, he encountered the cloaked sentinel once more, standing silently amidst the ruins. This time, however, the figure spoke. "You cannot outrun what you carry within you," it rasped, gesturing toward Lucas's chest. "The Al-Nathir chose wisely. Their puppet walks willingly." Lucas staggered backward, clutching his heart as searing pain shot through his body. When he looked up, the sentinel was gone, leaving him alone amidst the ruins. Gasping for breath, he realized the truth. The shadow wasn't following him. It was him. As the threads of their individual journeys began to intertwine, the team found themselves drawn inexorably towards a single location: a forgotten temple buried beneath the ice of Antarctica. There, amidst glowing symbols etched into the earth and fissures pulsing with dark energy, they would confront the ultimate question: who or what is the marked one? And will they destroy it, or join it. You're still here, or has fear already taken you away? If you haven't yet, leave a like and subscribe. Your support breathes life into the darkest stories. I hope we'll meet again soon. Next time, even darker and more terrifying secrets await you. Come back soon while I prepare new nightmares that will haunt your sleep.